Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building your own business with the people doing it. I'm your host and fellow business builder, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into some good, honest, small business chat.
Listener, my voice is almost gone, so I will keep this intro very short for you. Trust me when I say this business building story will be exactly what you need. It's about truly building a business that fits you, no matter how that looks and whatever needs to happen as it evolves. Let's get into it. I'm here with Dr. Marion Piper, aka Dr. Maz, who is your go-to gal if you want to live a fully creative life, which is a big yes, please, from me. Dr. Maz helps creatives and startups get unstuck so that they can communicate their world-changing ideas with confidence and passion. And she does this via her writing, her creativity coaching, speaking, and signature online course called Spiral Up. She's also created a beautiful resource in her podcast, What Doesn't Kill Us, which is a space to learn how to navigate troubled waters in a creative way. For Marion, it's not just about making art or solving problems, it's about why creativity can be the best antidote for trauma. Having travelled the world and completed a swag of degrees, including a BA of Creative Arts, a Masters of Arts, a PhD of Philosophy, Dr. Maz is on a mission to change how we understand, embrace and use creativity, building herself, others and her business from an inspired space. Dr. Maz, welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Oh, what an intro. I'm so happy to be here.
I'll tell you what a swag indeed of incredible accomplishments in higher learning. Like, wow to you. It just must have been such a slog, but such an inspiring one.
Yeah, it's funny because I basically did them because I just didn't want to get a full-time job. So I was just presented these opportunities and I was like, you know what? Actually, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Way better than entering the workforce. So thanks very much. I'll take it.
And you must have been pretty stoked the other day seeing that finally the small change that's been made to HEX debt and help debt and things like that. My God.
I can't believe that we're still having that conversation. I can't believe... last year it was just ridiculous. I'd gotten so good, I'd made so much headway on paying off my debt, and then bam, just throw another like $7,000 on it. Sure thing, for like no reason. I was like, cool, bro, cool.
It's unbelievable, and it's unbelievable to think. I mean, don't even mean to go on a tangent straight off the bat, but it's unbelievable to think that the people making these decisions about this debt didn't pay for university themselves.
I have so many thoughts on that. And also, you know, especially when you get to higher degrees by research, that your research actually becomes something that people can use to develop policy. It's like a snake eating its own tail.
Oh, geez, I tell you, backwards is definitely the word I'd use to describe much of the current state. But anyway, let's move on from that and something far more positive. Let's talk about your best friend a little bit. How would they describe you?
My best friend would probably describe me as high energy, multi-passionate, always up for an adventure. I'm definitely the friend with the stories, for sure. I've definitely made the most of my short time on this planet. They'd definitely describe me as creative, probably stubborn, probably pretty compassionate, I think. One of the beautiful gifts of trauma, and particularly childhood trauma, is that it does tend to give you this incredible empathic ability to, you know, read the room, to understand immediately where people are at. So I feel pretty lucky in that regard, despite, you know, not wishing that I'd gone through a lot of what I've gone through. And I know a lot of my other trauma kids out there will definitely identify with that feeling specifically. And I think more recently, you know, I've gone on a bit of a health journey. So I think my current friendship circle mostly centers around my gym. So they'd probably describe me as healthy and fit now, which is, I'm very, very happy to report that is true.
I think there's that always up for an adventure factor and stubbornness, which are two things that I hear quite often from people in our line of work in entrepreneurship. I think they're pretty common traits in terms of tackling what it is we have to do every day, which is pretty intense.
Bang on the money there. I think if you can look at life as if it is a grand adventure, isn't there? I feel like there's a quote there's an old quote about that, life is a grand adventure or nothing at all or something like that. And for me, I feel like the worst possible outcome for this life is getting stuck in the mundane. So I think that's why choosing this path, going down this path of self-employed business route, while it's not, while at the moment I could be making so much more money in a job, I think for me personally, the trade-off, and everything has a trade-off. This is something that I've learned as an adult. Every single thing in life, even the good stuff, especially the bad, it all has a trade-off. And so the trade-off for me is very much worth the pain of that adventure, because that's the thing with adventures, right? Once you set off, you have all this inspiration and excitement and energy, and you're going to hit roadblocks, you're going to hit obstacles, but that doesn't mean it's still not an adventure. It's only, I guess, suppose the only time it's not an adventure is when you choose to return home, or you decide that this adventure isn't for you and you give up, which, what I love about what you're doing and what this podcast stands for is that there's this idea that we just need to keep going. And that's really been my mantra, particularly in the last 12 months. And I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with this when things have just been probably the hardest they've been in business for me, is that we just have to keep going and understanding that on the adventure, every hero, every heroine, they always stop and rest and get fuel. They might stop in a little hamlet along the way, meet some new characters, rest, recuperate before they then go off and face their biggest challenge yet. So yeah, I think adventure is a really great word to describe what it is that we do.
You just triggered a random creative idea. I don't know if you meant to, but imagine a video game based on being a business owner. Like, I was just thinking about having to refuel, like stop and reload your weapons of choice. It'd be the nerdiest video game ever.
I love this. I love this idea. And I picture it as like a player one kind of game from the perspective of the player one, kind of Grand Theft Auto style.
Yes, there's I could go on a real tangent with that. I used to play that quite a lot as a teenager. So yeah,
There you go.
I really like that. So how did you end up in business for yourself? What brought you here?
Oh man, probably very similar to a lot of other creatives, I think. When you work in creative agencies, when you work in the creative industries, there's a couple of things that are really frustrating. One of which is that your time is not your own. And particularly in an agency environment where it's the constant argument is between billable versus non-billable time, and it's all about capacity. And obviously, the faster you can do your work, the more financially beneficial you are to the business, which I don't think is exactly the right way to measure creativity anyway. And then the other thing is, not being able to choose what you work on. So in 2019, when I was the creative director of a comms agency, I got sent on this one particular client job, which was up in Brisbane. So I was spending half my week up in Brisbane, half my week back in Melbourne, which I loved. I loved to travel. I loved to go new places. So that was really cool. But the problem was the client that I was working on, they had a real aversion to outsiders coming in. And so I was kind of kept there. I had nothing to do. They wouldn't let me in on any of the project work. I kind of had to go around this like a side door and work with a different team in order to get in on the work. So, and I guess I got kind of frustrated because I was communicating this to the team and it wasn't being heard. And so I finally got to a point where I actually, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a plan for going into business. I didn't even think that would be a possibility. I just knew I had to stop doing what I was doing. So when I kind of left that job, I sort of let myself decompress for a month or so after. And then I started to think, well, maybe, I've just been running somebody else's business. Maybe this is something that I could try for myself and see. And so I did the classic thing where I'd just been running an agency. So I treated myself as an agency. And just, and then COVID hit. So I was just kind of in this work bubble for a good 2 years where I didn't stop. And I was, it was a blessing and a curse, I think, to have my first 2 years in business be a time when work was abundant. Everyone was trying to get online. Everyone was in the one place, and I think that's why the last year has been so hard, because it's a different world now. It's a different market now. But I think more than anything, I never worked in corporate. I'd only had a couple of full-time jobs. So I've always been someone who's just done the whatever it takes to kind of maintain my creative life. So, and my background before working in agencies, I worked in an art gallery, I worked at a summer camp. So these are all very, very bizarre environments in themselves. So I think that probably contributed to me not being as afraid as other people to just jump in and get started. Whereas I know for a lot of people, they require that safety net behind them. So what they'll do is they'll often start a side hustle and then they'll sort of build that up over time. But as someone who recently has discovered their neurodivergence, I realized that I am a 0 to 100 kind of lady, and there are good things to that and not so good things to that.
Tell me a little bit more about managing that neurodivergency, as much as you'd like to share in terms of the process of, establishing what that looked like for you, but, also how that's played a part in the running of your business, how that's changed things for you.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I'm still really discovering what that means for me in a business context. But it definitely, so for me personally, I have someone who had kind of went through quite significant childhood trauma, and this is not new knowledge. People want to learn a bit more about that, they can jump onto my podcast and listen. But I think what my therapist and I, the constant argument we have, it's not really an argument, but more of like a trying to pinpoint what's going on at any given time. It's like, is it my childhood trauma or is it ADHD? And I know that that's kind of become a bit of a meme at the moment, but for me, the neurodivergence explains why I struggled so much to stay in full-time work, why I like to have multiple things to work on at once, why I'm really, really, really great at starting things, but struggle so much to finish. So I often have a bunch of projects that are at like 75% complete that would probably, all I need to do is sit down for half a day and then they'll be done.
I feel that.
Yeah, right. Understanding that that's just, there's not anything wrong with that this is, my brain works in a particular way. And my kind of working theory, which I've sort of adopted from Dr. Gabor Mate, who's a really great voice in this space, is that my ADHD was a result, it was a coping mechanism for the trauma that I went through because I just didn't get my needs met as a kid, And so obviously there's some underlying genetic stuff there. And I'm pretty certain that both my parents, in their own beautiful ways, have spicy brains. But yeah, what it's really meant for me business-wise is because I have this just really high internal motor that just won't stop. And so it's really, really easy for me specifically to burn out on things that other people find really easy to do. So it's all those executive function tasks like organizing, planning, structuring my days. They're the things that really trip me up, especially if I have too many things on. So what it's been a really good lesson for me is to learn how to slow down, how to just take like a few steps back and give myself more space than I need. And one of the best descriptions of the ADHD brain that I've heard lately is that the way that we view time. So for someone who has an ADHD, like there's two types of time. There is now and there is not now. So from a business perspective, you can understand how that might create a few problems. I can't really, whenever I'm looking at what I need to do for the day, I just see everything as important. Me and prioritization, we don't go really well together. I will try and do everything all at once or not at all. So there's this kind of like all or nothing thinking that I've been really trying to dissect and find ways where I can channel it. So I think that's part of my journey lately has been just trying to understand my brain a little bit more and trying to pick up on those default reactions and habits that I have to things so that when I do get triggered, I can kind of go to my, bag, my toolkit of things that I can do to manage it. But I definitely find that working for myself is definitely better for my nervous system from an ADHD perspective because I can actually structure my time the way that I want. However, working for myself is also incredibly bad for my childhood trauma because of abandonment issues, because of high, really, really high standards that I set for myself. So it's a constant, I sort of have started to understand that it's a pendulum. So when it swings one way, when, clients aren't getting back to me, when I feel isolated, then I know that that's a trauma response and I've got to do some things to take care of that. But then on the other side of the coin, when there's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of competing priorities. That's oftentimes when my ADHD symptoms get really activated. So then I have a different set of tools to do with that. So for me, it's a process of understanding that like that's never not going to be there. Those things are always, it's just a part of who I am. And this is where I think creativity in itself as both a process and a practice can be really useful for managing all of that stuff, because what it does is it forces you to join the dots in new and interesting ways so that you can come up with more solutions that are better for you, not just off the shelf like, oh, go for a walk or whatever. Every neurodiverse person that I've encountered needs a combination of different things that are very specific to them. So, if there's someone listening who is maybe thinking that they might also have those experiences, absolutely 100% go and explore that, because even just in the process of exploring it, I've learned so much more about myself, which has allowed me, really the goal here is the self-acceptance piece. So it's really allowed me to accept where I'm at and compare myself less to those, to Brad, the coach who's, 6 figures in and, has a team of 20 people. And if you're not doing it that way, what are you doing? You're lazy, blah, blah, blah. That whole conversation that we see online that is so damaging to everybody in business.
Such a beautiful share, and I can imagine so many people listening, to the listener who's going, wow, I see myself in a lot of that. I just want to say, yes, me too. I'll keep my next build onto this very personally focused because of the experience of exploring your own mind, how it works, how it responds to different things, and different diagnosis journeys as well, being really sensitive to that. Because everything you just said, I resonate with completely. And I myself have gone, okay, do I need to go down a diagnosis journey here? And for me, my personal choice has been no, not right now, because availability and money, but also just even hearing stories like your own and looking at all of the work that I do to fill up my toolkit generally, which I think is just a learned behavior by most business owners, to be like, oh shit, just to like keep going. Give me some tools, just give them to me. Let me just have a little look at it. I think that's just been such an incredible support, even before formalizing anything, or even if formalizing something becomes never a priority for me as an individual, just to go, I identify with a lot of what was just said and a lot of that experience. Okay, how can I take that now and learn and look at my own approach to professionalism?
And I don't think, and I'm sort of like, I've been somewhat diagnosed. I haven't gone down the full diagnosis journey yet, mostly because of the trauma work that I've been doing, which it's actually been more urgent than the other side of the coin, right? Even though they are the same, they're on the same coin, they're just different sides, and they're very, very much interlinked. And actually, when you'd said about, business amplifying all of these things, it reminds me the journey I'm on right now reminds me of when I was in the depths of my PhD, which if anyone's done a higher degree by research, you'll understand that it's actually not about what you're researching, but it's about you and your identity and your experience and the way you see the world and your internal biases. And basically you go through this really intense personal development journey where you pull out all of these things. You pull out why you see things the way they are, why the world is structured in that particular way for you. And you break it down and then you put it back together as you are doing the research that you want to do, as you're exploring the hypothesis that you want to explore. And that's essentially what we do as business owners. It's what we do, especially if you're a creative in business. It's what you do for your clients, because you are taking the way they see the world, what they do, their experience, and you're breaking it down. You're piecing it back together and you're explaining it in a way that other people are going to understand and then want to buy into, which is exactly the research journey, albeit, it's a different kind of commercial setup, obviously, because research is way more about the process and the journey and the knowledge, whereas business is way more about the outcome, the revenue, and, what people are going to get from you, So similar kind of experiences. But yeah, I just remember so much crazy shit happened in my PhD because life keeps happening, right? Same as when you're in a business. Life is not going to stop just because you're a business owner and you're important and you've got you've got these client work to do. There's always going to be things happening in the background. And I just remember at certain points in my PhD just being like, what is happening? Like, I am so laser focused on this thing that I am creating. And I have all these habits and practices, and I've structured my day a certain way. And yet life still keeps lifing and keeps trying to pull me away from it and drag me in like 20 different directions, which again, especially if you are someone who works solo in business, that is like the hardest thing. That and the context switching, constantly having to move from activity to task to client to networking to lead generation. Like, people don't talk about how fucking hard that is to do and how hard that is to maintain over the course of a year, let alone multiple years. Like, so I am not surprised that most business owners just decide to like tap out after 3 years, because it's a lot to carry, and especially all that creative output. So you constantly in this production process. And when we look at the creative process itself, there's two parts of it that are so underserved, particularly in business. And I see this all the time. It's that incubation period for ideas. Like, so many coaches online and so many business people, gurus will tell you that you have to have an idea and take action immediately. But what that does is it actually short circuits your creative process. And so people often wonder why they can't get started or they just don't have the energy to maintain it, is because we need to have an incubation period where we feed the idea and we let things percolate, and then we trust in the timing and we wait for that hit. And it always comes. It might be a week later, it might be a day later, it could be an hour later, it could be a year later. But that incubation process is really important. And then the other part of this that's really, really important is the space that you allow for the work at the end. So often people will just keep producing, keep releasing, keep launching, keep giving, feed. But they don't allow that work to take a life of its own out in the real world. And I see this all the time, and people get really impatient because of the world that we live in, that it has to earn money today, yesterday, 3 weeks ago. And what you're doing with those things, when you take the space out of the creative process, you actually take away all the beautiful benefits that you receive as a person from that. So I know that's a bit of a tangent, but to go from talking about PhD to that, but this is something that I'm really passionate about helping people understand, is the power of space, and also too, the power of not doing as opposed to doing in business.
Listener, I want to introduce you to another amazing business I met recently. They're called Card.gift, based out of Melbourne, Australia, and they love what we're doing here for you with the pod. And we both think you and your team deserve a little something, because we all get it. It's real easy to get lost in the admin of end of financial year, or EOFY, as major retailers like to say in their sale ads. But this time of year is about so much more than wrapping up reconciliation and reporting. It's a chance to reflect on what the last 12 months has looked like for your business, your wins, your opportunities, the epic contributions being made by your team, and all the ways you've undoubtedly innovated along the way. That deserves some acknowledgement with a gift that will matter, so that whoever you're buying for can buy what they want when they want. Card.gift is a prepaid digital MasterCard, Visa or EFTPOS gift card who make gifting super easy and personal. They're dedicated to transforming the gifting experience by creating cards that are more than just money. They're personalised symbols of gratitude, love and celebration. You can personalise them with photos of you and your team. I'm totally getting myself one with my own face on it because #Celebpreneur And you can even include a custom written or video message that appears as part of the digital unboxing, which is a beautiful way to deepen the connection with those you're sending to. Or if you're feeling really rushed, you can grab one they've pre-designed for you. There's loads of styles that will align with your aesthetic. And given that they can send it straight to the recipient by email or text, you can make a positive impact without loads of extra work. So maybe it's your team you want to show gratitude to, your clients that you want to thank, or even just something fun for you. Pop card.gift into Google and enjoy a little Unemployed and Afraid discount by adding Unemployed 10 at checkout for 10% off on selected Visa, MasterCard, EFTPOS, and the card.gift swap card products. Big snaps to card.gift for making our end of financial year gifting easier and for supporting the show. Oh, this is the most wonderful of tangents. And it took me on a little bit of a tangent as well, just thinking about just how frustrating it is how our brains have been trained by social media to act in the way we do when it comes to product or service launches or offerings or ideas having to be birthed in that moment and put out into the world for feedback before that incubation period has an opportunity to make it better. You're moving on so quickly. I mean, it's just so interesting to see how that our generation, that the industrialization or the digital industrialization, a better way to kind of explain it, that we've just been trained to operate in this way, and it's so against the fundamentals of so much of this. I mean, it's really got me thinking just about that launch and release process that we go through in business. You're right, everything feels incredibly important. And then, we work on a resource, say if we're in that kind of service-based industry looking to get into a more passive income, and you put something out in the world and then you're like, okay, like, did I have $100,000 launch like that person on Instagram told me? No. Does that mean it's a failure? Like, no. Like, what if I just hung out with that piece of work for a little bit longer and saw how I could improve it and grow it, market it into new places, let it find its audience, let its audience talk about it to other people. Like, we just move on so quickly to fill the cup all the time. It's like the endless scroll. What's that called? Infinite scroll of our action, like we're just infinite scrolling all the time in our own thoughts and our own ideas. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and from a body that has not evolved fast enough to actually process that. I've talked to my friends, talked to my other biz besties, and there's no satisfaction in that life, because people, I've heard some business coaches talk about, stopping to reward yourself. And I'm like, how can you reward yourself when you haven't even gone through the process in the right way? You have to give yourself space and time. And I think this is why I often say to clients of mine, work on multiple things at once, because you don't know when something's going to be ready to go. So have obviously don't have 50 things going, because you'll drive yourself insane and you'll feel like, you're losing your mind. But if you had sort of 3 to 5 different ideas that you were working on at any given time, that then you could decide and move your energy between those based on how you feel and where you're at in business, rather than putting the business first and leaving yourself as the servant of the business. This is where we really can learn a lot from the artists of the world. They don't show up and sit at their desk at their computer 24/7. They're oftentimes people's best creative work comes after they've gone and had a really beautiful life experience that's really given them a lot of information and a lot of feedback. And also too, more to your point around launching something for feedback, I have these things in my life, these people called my critical friends. And so before I send anything public, I send it to them, because they're the people that I trust. They're the people whose opinion matters to me and whose feedback will actually be valuable. And so the danger is when launching things and creations into the world that maybe aren't quite ready, or they're not polished enough, or maybe you've waited too long and you've lost that zest, that fire for the idea. When it hits the eyeballs of people who aren't the right people to see it, and you immediately get that feedback, of course you're going to want to quit. Of course you're not going to want to launch anything ever again. So yeah, I think there's a really beautiful dance. And I think the people that do it the best are the ones that aren't often at the very peak. They're the people that are just, they just seem like they're on their own little planet. There's a few people that I follow who I'm like, you do not care about what anybody else is doing, and it shows. You're on your own timeline. You're releasing things in a way that is, I can feel through the screen that is nurturing you, that it is supporting the life that you want. Because equally on the other side of that is I can feel when people are desperately desperately launching from a place of lack of like, I need this to make money. I need this to be thing, rather than it being what it should be, which is an offering to support people, and that's where, when you look at good art, it's not designed for an audience. Good art is a beautiful piece of authentic self-expression. And I feel like, especially as the marketplace gets noisier and noisier and more oversaturated and more, as it continues to become a bit more of a word soup, the more you can tap into that authentic self-expression place, I think that's going to make you stand out way more than, just trying to keep up with the latest trend, for example.
You've segued me beautifully into something I wanted to explore with you, which is that tension point of business, I think that so many of us find ourselves in, which is this ability to create, to share, to build, to, have this thing, not work, not to create a job for ourselves, but to have this business that supports us in whatever way we need, to whatever level we need. When that desire meets the financial pressure, the tension between the two, and how, speaking from personal experience, I've definitely been there, just how hard it is to make a choice of any kind when you feel like that heaviness on your shoulders of the importance of financial pressure and, needing to sustain yourself. What has that journey been like for you, and how have you navigated it?
Oh, woof. Yeah, look, I think that constant pressure, particularly if you are someone who identifies as a creative, when what you love is what you want to do, I think, and and in those situations where it's really only you that can deliver it. I think it's a different story when we start to talk about other ways of working, like coaching, like creating digital products. You have a little bit more flexibility around who can be the person to actually sit down and do the work. But if you're a designer, if you're a copywriter, even actually if you work in marketing, because your idea is your currency when it comes to those things, I don't think that pressure ever really goes away. And I think one of the things that's really helped me over the years is understanding that every job is fuel for what you want to do, rather than, looking at maybe a job comes in and you meet someone and they're lovely, but the content of the work, you're just like, oh, I'm not really connected to it. Understanding that is both it's going to be a learning opportunity. It's going to give you more fuel, AKA money, to do the things that you want to do. And understand, I think too, that anything worthwhile building takes a really long time. Again, coming back to that, we live in a very impatient society that demands everything happen yesterday. Anything of enduring value or depth or breadth is going to take some time to build. But for me, I think starting out the way I did and treating myself like an agency made me realize very quickly that I'm just one person, and doing all the shitty jobs, doing all the ones that, weren't aligned, were really hard, the clients were awful. It's all information too. So I think learning that over time, that I feel like there's always going to be a little bit of that work that you have to do. But again, you kind of just want to aim for, increasing the gap between that kind of work and the work that you really love to do. But also understanding that business is, I think, well, at least in my opinion, business is an evolution, and learning what season you're in, learning what your lifestyle needs to be will also feed into and determine the kind of work that you take on. And I'm very much lifestyle first. I'm not a dollar chaser, probably to my detriment, to be perfectly honest, because it's really hard sometimes to drum up a sense of urgency when you're not motivated by money. I'm very much motivated by people and the creative work. So I can work for, 3 days straight, taking very little breaks if it's on something that I absolutely am really passionate about. But sometimes sit me down to try and write some website copy, and I'm so fidgety. Also, this is ADHD symptoms. Can't sit still, can't focus, can't do any of that stuff. So I think giving yourself a bit of grace through all of that, and then, having people that are going through what you're going through that you can talk about with that, who you can borrow skills and strategies from. I think, that stuff is really invaluable.
So invaluable. I completely agree. So let me go into the nitty-gritty a little bit of your business model. You talked there about, opening the doors of your own business as an agency. And so, those taking on clients, the billable hours, and then moving into where you are now, which sounds a little bit more like offerings, like you're developing these offerings and then putting them out in market and kind of having a multifaceted approach around those offerings. Talk to me about that nitty-gritty, what it looked like and how you moved it to where it is today and what that looks like.
Well, it was like trying to push a square boulder up a mountain for the
Feels.
most part. It was very very ungraceful, and I think I'm still in that transition period. I'm definitely not doing all the work that I want to do, but I've made so much headway in the last couple of years. And honestly, the way that I changed it is just by changing it. You can't keep adding things in and expect everything to change. It's been a bit of a dance for me. So I used to do a lot of blog writing, and that would take up a lot of time. And with AI coming in, that kind of made that decision for me. So it pretty much scrapped all my retainers. So all my retainers have gone over the last couple of years, which is fine. But in its place, I've kind of got a bit of a hybrid offering that I do, which can be set up in a bunch of different ways. And this is what I love, particularly what I love so much about being an entrepreneur and being in business, is that you get to decide how you deliver this stuff, and it can change client to client. I love having that flexibility. So I've never really been someone who's like, this is the package, this is the price, this is what you get, Because I always found whenever I did that, people were like, oh, I love this, but can I add in this thing? Can I take out this thing? Can we move this around? So I've pretty much just been a little bit more flowy when it comes to packages in general. It was a little bit easier when I was offering blogs because I'd just be like, yeah, $5 a month. Here you go. This is the price. And then every time I brought on a new client, I'd just add $50. So it's kind of how I increase my prices over time. But now I essentially offer copywriting and creativity coaching as like the service-based offerings. And then I do workshops and speaking gigs alongside that, as well as creating products and courses that, are from, that authentic creation place, the information that I really, really, really want people to take away from me, I will put in a product, because that's the enduring value, right? That's the stuff that's going to outlive me eventually. So at the moment I have like full day and half day creative support, which I've created as like a bit of a catch-all for either copywriting or creativity coaching, because I actually found that I do both at the same time anyway, because my zone of genius is writing, and the delivery method is I'm a natural coach. I want to teach, I want to communicate. That's also the academic in me, right? I want people to understand the concepts. I want to give you the how. I want to make it so you never have to rely on me, but that you can come back to me when you need that energy. That's kind of what I'm aiming for. And so the business model has just been this like amorphous blobby beast. It's kind of, slinked its way around, and it's been, huge and overcomplicated and very opaque, and I didn't really know what it was. And then at other times it's been really small, like a little bouncy ball that I've been able to hold in my hands, and I'm like, oh, this is light and I can see through it and I understand exactly what I'm doing. And sometimes it's also been both. So I think, like, warts and all, it's not been a process that has felt really good most of the time, and it's really activated in me and shown me, like, I don't want to say where my weaknesses are, but where my blind spots are when it comes to this stuff. But one of the things that I discovered along the way through that journey, and particularly with podcasting, was how much I needed to speak about this stuff, and how much I needed to talk through all of these ideas and have these, much more nuanced conversations about creativity and about business and about our work lives, because we spend so much time there. And so, so at the moment, I feel like I'm on the precipice of another slight pivot, change, twist that I want to roll in. I can feel it. When you can just feel it brewing,
Mm-hmm.
You're like, something's coming, something's trying to come through. And, in the interim, like, full disclosure, I've been applying for jobs because I want to take some of the financial pressure off that work, whether that's a part-time or a full-time. I don't really care at this point, just somewhere where I can continue to keep growing my skills. And, and I'm not averse to doing that, because again, like I said before, it's just fuel. All of this stuff is fuel. And, it's not just about where you're at too. It's like what's happening in the economy, what's happening in the market. But yeah, so I mean, in the last couple of years, I've run journaling workshops, which is something I'm really passionate about, which I've done in huge corporates, and I've done that direct to consumer. So I've just done it online. I created a deck of journal prompt cards that I illustrated and got printed myself, which I absolutely loved that process. I think probably future-wise for me, like I would love to just have a product-based business so that I could, share and speak and do all the other stuff around it, but that again is its own beast that you've got to navigate. So yeah, I think my business model is a bit of a hybrid and a bit of a creative experimentation, because that's who I am, and I think the best business models reflect the business owner in all shapes and forms.
You're exactly right. It really is about avoiding getting hung up on that picture of what it should look like or what you think it should look like. I'm such an advocate for the exploration of becoming an employee in whatever way you need to, through the experience of also being a business owner. If you need to dip in full time for a short window of time or a longer period of time, great. If you need to dip in part time because whether it's a need or whether it's just a joy or something that's really exciting for you, that's going to feed the future this vision we have of what a successful business owner looks like is really damaging to just being a successful business owner yourself, because that can be full-time hustle down to a side hustle down to a future hustle at any time, and it can we've got one life to live, so we've got to do it in the way that matters to us. And yeah, so I'm really, really pleased you brought that up to share, because I think we have to put that in our minds more often. It's not just the person who's been in business for 9 years and now has an 8-figure business with 5 different locations and is building things off the back of it. That's not always the goal. It might be, but it can also be all the different signposts along the way and how it can look. And I think that's a very natural state for a lot of us who are in this kind of service based, but also digital product based, but also, things like speaking and writing. I mean, of course, a kindred spirit in that space because it's very similar with what I do. And just when you find yourself having to sell bespoke all the time, I bring this up because I've had a similar journey in terms of the strategic advisory I do for brands who want a podcast. And, you start with like a service. You're like, okay, so like I'll come in and do this thing. And, you kind of get it down to a process, which is never easy when it comes to a strategic or a creative process at all. But, you kind of get it down to this is how I'll approach it and it will cost this much. And this is what I can sell into a market. I definitely had that experience. And then something, like you said, that thing that starts building, you're like, nah, I don't like it. It closes the door too much. It takes away the opportunity for bespoke conversation to be like, but what is it that you need about that process that I can take out and also add in with education? Or, like, what is it about what you need, person who I'm talking to in a sales environment, to be able to achieve what it is that you need to achieve? That's something I think so many of us experience, but also fight because of that need for clarity to be like, I do this and this is my service. And if I sell 10 of these, I'll be at this rate. Then I can take this, draw out of my business and yay, I've got a salary. It's such a fight in that space. So I want you to take me, I guess, a little bit into your experience of that selling bespoke. And so you're in front of a client, you're kind of having to move from a space where you might be able to say, oh, I'll do 5 blog posts for you for a month for X amount, to I'm going to bring you, like, tell me your problem. I'm going to bring you my solution. How does that feel for you in that sales environment? And what do you do next in terms of selling yourself in that way?
Yeah. Man, I struggle with sales. I'm not a natural seller in that regard. I struggle with the close. I'm not the, and I've got some friends who are, oh my God, chef's kiss. They just have the gift. They have that gift. And I do believe that some people are just naturally, that's what they can do. That's their superpower. So I think for me, I kind of focus on getting people excited about the process, because at the end of the day, the thing that I actually walk away with, particularly as a service-based creative, my goal is that I want them to walk away feeling more excited about what they do than when they started. Because if you're excited, the selling is easy, So same for me. I have to make what I do so compelling and exciting to myself that I actually want to do it. Because otherwise I may as well just go and get a job honestly. And so, yeah, when I think initially when I was just selling blogs, it was pretty simple because people knew that they wanted to grow their online presence. They had a blog. They, had some content. They may have had some SEO research done. So like, it was just a case of me plugging in and being like, yes, this is what my natural writing style is. This is how I like to work. This is my process. This is what it costs. That sales process was really, really straightforward. But then when you start to get into things like branding, like verbal branding, which is, your tone of voice, your key messages, your brand story. And then even when you get into creativity coaching, which is again, way more opaque and so much more open-ended because that's what creativity is. I found that what I lent on more was talking about who I am as a creative, what my experience is, what projects I've worked on. And that to me has been the easiest way to sell across what I do rather than talking about the process or what it actually is. So often when I'm on that sales journey with someone for creativity coaching, for example, which can take anywhere from a week to a year. Like I had someone recently who I was connected with like a year and a half ago, who kind of swung back now and has just finally booked in, So I think it's a little bit, you have to be willing to sort of sit in that uncomfortable space of not knowing when something might land. And I've even had people who have been like, yep, I'm in, and then not book in for another 3 months. So that's why I think, also I think it's important if you are a creative in business is to have multiple income streams so that you can catch yourself when that does happen. But what I did with her was that she was like, oh, like she had a lot of uncertainty and I could feel it across the screen about her direction in life. And so what I did was I was like, write down everything that's happening for you right now. And I will tell you my honest feedback. So what I'm already doing, I'm already coaching her, and I think a lot of people are afraid. They try to gatekeep their knowledge and their information before they've started working with someone. But in my experience, what I've found is when you actually give them a little bit, or you give them the what, give them something to create just enough certainty that they're like, I can trust this person. This person knows what they're talking about. That I've found is actually better than trying to convince them that you're the right person to do the job.
Yes. Oh, this is like my head's about to fall off nodding with that. I just took so much away from what you just said. But there was one part you said in there about making it exciting for the person that you're selling to. I think that is just so relevant for both service and product-based businesses to not forget that. Like people, they want to buy a feeling, an experience, they want to buy a person. So yeah, getting them excited about the project you're doing, not making it too dry, too structured, too down to deliverables, to cost, per hour and things like that. Making it exciting is such valuable advice. But you're so right. We are often so afraid to, and I guess this is a byproduct of being in business for yourself when everything does feel important and your hours are so important because we constantly work for no money, like all day. Like I can sit down at my desk and edit for 12 hours and not make a cent. And so we're so used to already doing that. When we're in that sales environment, I think we have that energy behind it to be like, now is the time I get paid. Let me just move to a sale. But by slowing down and investing in that person a little bit, giving away your knowledge, showing your value so that people know what you do, far more likely to actually get that sale. It's just so, so very true. I talked about that just when it comes to LinkedIn, not being afraid to give your value away for free so people see who you are and not always be like, here's some value. Now go sign up to my newsletter. Here's some value. Now just go do this, just finding that confidence to just throw things out there and be there for a person, whether it's generally in a social media space or one-to-one in sales, to see where it goes. Like, what valuable insight. I love that from you.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. But also, I will say, it's a balance, right? I think it's a balance. And I, by no means, get this right even probably 70% of the time, right? I think it's probably 50-50 that I find the right way to do this, and sometimes, you will give something away and nothing will happen. Just the same as you will work with someone and then you work with them once and then off they go because that's just what they needed. I feel like a lot of it is energy and intention. I'm a huge advocate for not doing things for free. And I will give my friend Suze Chadwick a shout out for this one particularly, because she has this great saying where she says, if you get paid, I get paid. And that's kind of rung in my head. So if you're thinking about, and it's a great way to think about whether or not you want to take on an opportunity where you're not going to get paid, is if the person, and this has happened to me before, really, really high profile people that I've gone into their community and I've done a masterclass for free, and I've not been paid, even though they are getting paid by their clients, and it doesn't have to be much money. It can be a very nominal amount. But I think in those instances, you should not work for free. But in an instance like this, for example, when we're on a podcast, I see this as a very valuable energy exchange. You're not getting paid, I'm not getting paid, but what we're doing is that we're helping each other by combining our forces and growing each other's audience, So I think you have to be discerning about opportunities where you give your knowledge and also understand, what part of the knowledge equation of your IP is the most valuable. And that's what you keep and you give, that's exchange for money. But there are, if you think of like an iceberg analogy, there'll be things that are at the tip of the iceberg above the water that, you're totally comfortable with anybody knowing. And that's the stuff that you continue to offer and find different ways to talk about. But then the real meat of what you do, that, the big bulk of the iceberg, it's under the water, that's the stuff that you reserve for your paying clients. So I think, a really easy way to, well, not easy, none of this stuff is easy. It's one of the ways that I use to figure out, like, particularly when it comes to content creation and what I share on LinkedIn and what I share on Instagram. I'm like, okay, of this big thing that I want to walk people through, or I want people to share, like, what's the lead in that I could share that would just give them enough information that they'd be curious about it, rather than asking for the sale. Just be like, okay, how can I generate a bit of interest? But again, a lot of this for me is aspirational, and I'm still figuring out the best ways to do this. So I don't want to say all that and make myself sound like some kind of, like I've got everything figured out, because half the time I don't. But when you have something as a bit of a North Star for you, when you've got the aspiration towards something, I think it makes the experimentation process and that creative journey more palpable. Like, you're able to actually be resilient about everything that's happening because you know where you're going, even if it's just a direction, even if it's just a vibe, even if you're just kind of like, hey, I want this kind of life. If you've got that, then again, everything again becomes fuel, and it's a lot easier to stomach those times when shit just ain't working.
Oh, amen to those times. We just love them, don't we?
My favorite.
Yeah. I think, reminding ourselves as well with anything we hear in these kinds of environments. I mean, it's why this podcast exists, but it is about, leaning into what we know and, aspiring to where we go, as opposed to taking on pieces of knowledge to be like, if you do this, you get this, and then beating yourself up when you don't do the thing. It's everything we're doing in this gig, I think, can be boiled down to being aspirational to growth and aspirational to the ideal way. We're on a journey to get there. It's not like an end goal. It's just day by day. We add a little bit in, we do our best, we try again, and we keep going. It's like, it is literally how we're all operating in this gig. So it's so good to hear.
And one of the things that I love about the creative process and the creative journey more broadly, you never arrive. You just never arrive. So like, there is literally no point focusing on or making the outcome, making that the reason why you do everything that you do, because there's so much that is out of our control. And and I mean that in the most beautiful sense of the way. Like, your whole life could change 5 minutes from now in the most spectacular way, and you might not even have to do anything at all to make that happen. And like, when my darkest moments, when I am in a place where I cannot feel or see anything working, that is the one thing that pulls me out of the darkness, is that literally at any second, everything could change, And I think whether you're a business owner or not, having that energy, walking through the world with that energy, it keeps you buoyant, it keeps you paying attention, it keeps you aware. And the more aware and mindful you are of your position in the world, the more able you'll be to take advantage of those opportunities when they present themselves.
Oh, what an impactful thought. Really, it is around putting yourself out there, which is so much of what we have to do in business. And if you're listening to this being like, I haven't put myself out there enough because of fear of being seen or anything or otherwise, what you just described there, that is why we put ourselves out there, even when we're scared, even when we're a bit orkies and embarrassed and feeling the cringe factor. Like, that is why we put ourselves out there, because you do never know when it's going to come back. When someone who saw you out there or met you in a work environment or any kind of exchange says, oh, do you know what? I love that person. I'm going to get in touch with them and offer them this opportunity. Or I wonder if they'd be keen to collaborate with me on this project. And, that is so much about putting ourselves out there and getting out of our own way and just trusting that things will come through if you just keep persisting and just working on that network.
Yeah, so I've got a really great story to back this up, which I'll preface by saying, like, yes to all of that. And the thing is that you have to go first. Like, you have to be the one to like reach the hand out, to book the ticket, to quit the job, whatever it is. You got to go first because that's how the universe works.
And to send the awkward email to somebody to say, can we have a meeting? Or the awkward DM to be like, would you get onto a Zoom call and have a cup of coffee with me? Right?
Absolutely. And I think that's why I've been able to accomplish so much in my sort of short time on the planet so far. It's because I just had that from day one, thanks childhood trauma. That this insatiable like thirst for that for experience, number one. But what happened in 2020, just before lockdown happened, I went to a conference where I didn't really know anybody about it. I loved the branding. It was called No BS. It was all about great, having more raw and vulnerable conversations about life in digital. It was at the Forum Theatre, which is one of my favorite theatres in Melbourne. And, tickets were like really pricey for what they were. And I was just starting out and I was like, you know what? I feel like I need to be around that conversation and I want to be around those people. So I go to the conference, and one of my things that I like to do whenever I'm at an event is I'll take my iPad along and I like to do a bit of sketchnoting or graphic recording. It's just something that I like to do for fun. I've always just been like a doodler and a drawer, nothing like super realistic, but more like cute little icons and typography and things. And so what I did, it was over 2 days. And so for every talk, and it also helps me focus, which I've also discovered is a neurodiverse thing, having something else to do so you can actually listen, which sounds counterproductive, but it works. And so what I did, every talk, I illustrated, I drew it, I did it. And then one of the people that I ended up meeting was like, oh my God, you should show Jason, who's the guy who's put on this conference, show him these illustrations. And I was like, okay, point him out. So I went over to him almost like it was show and tell. I was like a little kid just trying to get approval. I was like, hi, my name is Marion. I've done these drawings. Would you like to see them? And he got them and he was like, oh my God, these are amazing. Like, who are you? They gave me a free t-shirt. And then fast forward 2 years later, he runs the next conference. I'm the first person he calls to speak at No BS in 2022. So kids, wow. You just don't know. You just don't know.
Oh, I couldn't love that anymore. That is a really beautiful story. And I'm so glad you shared it. And as somebody who, I'm actually preparing to go to the UK for the podcast show, which was like, staring down the barrel of an incredibly expensive flight and tickets to attend this conference that I just know I need to be at and just need to be around. Such confidence building. And I am also going to go buy that ticket to that other conference now as well. So
yes, not just it. Yes, that. Be in the room. Get in the room.
Getting in the room is just such great advice. So thank you for that story. And also I think it's such, almost a thank you on behalf of the listener as well, because sometimes things like that are just what we need to hear, is that it's not going to be, you're going to turn around and be an 8-figure business owner, 3 months after you launch. That's not reality. It's going to be these things that are going to happen with time and skin in the game and energy. And right back to what you said around creativity, the incubation period of our ideas and our business and ourselves to invest in that space. Just biggest thank you to you. You're always such a pleasure to talk to and to hear from. So thank you for being, such a great guest on this show. How can we support you though, Dr. Maz? How can we get around you and help you grow? Because you've just done so much to help us. What can we do?
Oh, I love that. So there are a couple of things. I'd love it if you gave my podcast, What Doesn't Kill Us, a listen. I also have a Substack called The Creative Urge, which for the price of a coffee, you can get access to. I've got an exclusive podcast on there. I give a whole month of journal prompts every month and then a bunch of other things. You can also join for free if you just want to come along on the journey. I give like a monthly newsletter on there too. And then, if you want to work with me, slide into my DMs. We can get creative about what that looks like. And then also too, like if you are listening to this and you've got an event coming up, you've got a community that you support who you think could use a bit of a creative rev up. If everyone's feeling a bit flat or a bit uninspired, I can come in and just, G up the troops so that they can keep going, because especially at the moment, we all need to start thinking more creatively. And I was listening to this really great podcast with the guy who's the co-founder of IDOU, which they're like a creative consultancy. I think his name's Tim Brown. Hopefully I'm not butchering that. But he was talking about when when the market is really certain, what we need to focus on is execution. So that's really where you're like smashing out the work, you're focusing on your process, you're honing those systems. But when the market is really uncertain and volatile, what we actually need is options, and we need more creativity. So if you're selling things at the moment and nothing's working, it's a really good reminder that in an uncertain market, people actually need different options. So we need to get a little bit more creative.
Oh, that is. And, how much does that energy of different options to start to inspire hope? And that inspiration feeds itself. Like that's absolutely what we need to lean into in tough economic times, is we can problem solve and we can come up with things that haven't existed before and create something wonderful. So it's a very hopeful place to leave us on today. Dr. Maz, thank you so much. It has been the biggest pleasure to hear your business story and to have your learnings be part of this podcast as well. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for carving out the space and for doing God's work for business owners everywhere, because she's a spicy one, folks. She's a spicy one.
Yes, she in fact is. I should have called this like unemployed, afraid, and spicy as a motherfucker.
Habanero business school or something.
Absolutely. Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the podcast for small business builders with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid wherever you're hanging out, and I'll see you there.